What do you mean it's not covered? It's a routine wart inspection. Besides, I thought you were in the Wicked Network. Oh, gotta go. Side hustles here. Hello, class. Due to the eating of a questionable restaurant sandwich, as well as the fragile nature of the Maine digestive system, your usual instructor will be out today. I will be taking her place. At least a few of you look familiar. Have we met before? Bad Fatty. Nice to meet you. Again. In between her trips to the bathroom, I was able to have a check-in with Miss Mandy about your current syllabus, and I have to say, I am very impressed. You've covered quite an array of interesting subjects in my absence. Death, estrangement, Maine politics. But I have to say, I was a little bit disappointed when I saw that the subject of fat people was, please forgive the pun, largely absent. Don't get me wrong, the last time I was here was great. Delicious food and debate, my favorite D&D session. But that was some time ago, and you can't fit everything there is to say on anti-fat bias in one video. That would take a lot of magic. But nothing? Literally not one more single video since I was last around? Well, I'm back, I'm still fat, and I have a lot to say on the subject of how fat people are represented in the media. And I'm not the only one, which is why today's video will feature some special guest speakers. For anyone who might unfortunately not be aware of who you are, what's your name, pronouns, and where might people know you from?
Well, I'm Ren the Barbarian. Yes, Ren the Barbarian, the YouTuber. I make videos about Star Trek and other pop culture. I've talked about superheroes and horror movies, all that good stuff.
My name is I'm Danny Dedem. You call yourself a film critic. I do YouTube, I do film and television analysis. Just my last few videos were actually about Husband Hotel, After Sun. I do yearly year-end lists. I kind of go into like analytical deep dives or video essays that kind of one of my main things is looking at like frameworks of certain topics and how they kind of affect things culturally.
Hi, I'm Zilla. I run a YouTube channel called Zilla's Athenaeum where I do video essays and other stuff ranging from little like linguistics and history tidbits told with, a bit of a fun layperson vibe to uh political commentary art videos like the one I just released where I am talking to myself in the person of three different political viewpoints, the video called You Can't Appease Fascists.
Well, I'm Sarah Azat. I go by the Fat Culture Critic on YouTube, although I
Mhm.
haven't been my productivity has been swallowed by menopause and
Mhm.
trying to finish a podcast. so,
You have a lot
so
going on. Fair.
yeah. So, I feel bad that I haven't managed to put out a video in a bit.
Hello. So, I'm Adnan. Any slash all slash don't call me late for dinner. Um, that's like my silly boomer joke, but I'm a queer, Syrian, disabled, chronically ill, fat person.
Mhm.
I like to be in the background and I like to just help people do whatever. There's a very real chance that you probably heard me or seen me or been on a fundraiser or something. Um, so you'll pretty well find me everywhere.
My name is Allie, and I am the creator of Okay to Be Fat, which has been on Twitter and it was really big on Tumblr until that got too overwhelming and I took it
Mhm.
down. And then it was on YouTube. Um, I'm kind of semi-retired at this point from fat activism due to like issues with long COVID. I'm also the author of a book called They Don't Make Plus Size Spacesuits, which is it's a short story collection. It's kind of short, but it's got short stories and an essay. And it's an exploration of the way fat characters have been treated or not been treated in science fiction specifically.
And really big, important first question, would you call yourself fat?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been fat since I was like 7 years old.
And why do you like to use that word for yourself?
I don't think it's a bad word necessarily. A lot of people will react like, "Oh, you're not fat, you're beautiful." And I'm like,
Hate that one.
those two are not exclusive.
The reason why I call myself fat is part of a larger fat activism project of reclaiming the word. So there, basically, it's an attempt to say that like fatness is a physical characteristic. It's a relative characteristic, but it is a physical characteristic that we can visually see. And so therefore that it should be treated like tall versus short, you know, to give it like a neutral kind of aspect. And then also it freaks people out, which is funny.
Yes. Yes, it does.
And so like when you take something that is a word that people like genuinely only use as an attempt to hurt you, and then you just say, no, that's my word, I use it for myself and I don't think it's bad, then they don't really have anything else. Like they've exhausted their ammo.
There's that thing with there was a Tyrion from Game of Thrones in like season 1 where he's talking to Bran and he says like I can't remember the exact quote off the top of my head, but it's like the world will always see you, so you might as well like kind of embrace it. And I just think there isn't anything inherent like fat is a neutral term. It's it's a form of body. It's a form of weight in measurement. It's a form of weight on the body. So long story short, yes, I would call myself fat.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm fat.
Yeah. And why? Why would you say that?
Well, compared to the way that the world is built, I am bigger bodied than what people expect. People have called me fat since I was small, and it was accurate. I have been bigger than average for my height, I guess, since about puberty. And I don't know, it doesn't bother me. It's never really bothered me.
I never thought about my body ever until other people made me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, I've been married for going on a decade. I've been with my partner for close to 2 decades. They have never a single time in my life made me feel bad about my body. Not just in, you know, the relationship ways, but like it's never been a part of who we are. And that's the only way I've been able to like decouple a lot of this stuff. Is just I'm fat. Like, hi, I'm fat. Hello. What now? What do you want out of me? You know? It's really hard because you don't, there's something about being labeled as such, which I don't think is inherently a bad thing. It's more that there's this inherent shame to feeling like you're taking up space that you are just allowed to have.
I did have a doctor once ask if I realized I was fat. And I'm like, well, I own a mirror.
Today's class will be discussion of anti-fat bias in the media and other subjects related to it. Anybody who has been on the receiving end of anti-fat bias and finds this a bit uncomfortable a subject to deal with is excused from this class. Everybody else, stay in your seats. Because like it or not, you need to hear this. Because today we're going to learn how to write a fat character. Let's get started.
This is so exhausting to see the exact same stupid. You know, if you're going to make fun of fat people, do some original jokes. Do something, you know, oh, I'm going to be crushed. Oh, this person likes food. You know, if you're going to, you know, use our bodies for comedy, at least make it looking and, original or entertain, if you're going to do it, I don't think, people should, but if you're going to do it, at least be funny.
Did you know that fat people are people? Yeah, wild, right? There are a lot of ways that people seem to get writing fat characters wrong, and this one, consciously or unconsciously, seems to be a major component of it. Too many straight-sized people seem to forget that fat people are fully sentient, competent human beings, multifaceted and just as complicated as anybody else. Fatness, rather than being a single trait in a sea full of descriptors, tends to be the only characterization a fat person gets. Have you ever seen one of those web idea charts, with everything kind of branching off? Well, it kind of feels like fat is the center circle, and that's just where everything else branches off of it. Fat characters tend to be written as lazy, mean, immoral, lazy, unintelligent, lazy, gluttonous, lazy, delusional, and of course, lazy. Is there a rallying first name JK present in this class? I joke, but honestly, it is pretty frustrating as a fat person that the people who look most like me on television tend to be very disappointing. Fat people do not often see ourselves represented in the media, and when we do, we're often met with a group of insulting, degraded, and frankly, recklessly written fat tropes wearing a trench coat. And not even a nice trench coat, like an edgelord's trench coat.
Well, me and our mutual friend Sarah we did a brief podcast together where we talked about portrayals of fat people, and we pretty much unilaterally agreed that the movie Shallow Hal had one of the worst fat representations ever.
Yep.
It had Gwyneth Paltrow in a fat suit, and it was just... It made you wonder if the people who made the film had ever actually met a real fat person.
There's a scene. There's 2 scenes where chairs break. There's a scene where she jumps off a diving board, and there's a huge wave that takes out children in the pool. And it's a whole the whole thing is this excuse to have these incredibly horrible fat jokes, and then and then it's it's a love story because he loves her anyway in the end, and also he's awful. Really cannot stress this enough that no one should ever watch that film, because they even make Jack Black repulsive, which is difficult because he's so charming.
They are constantly eating. Sometimes they deal with extreme agoraphobia, not going to any events outside of their home and instead choosing to spend all of their free time playing video games or watching television. Presented as asexual at best and delusional about their desirability at worst.
Lindy West, writer and producer of the TV show Shrill, based on her own essay collection, described this characterization as a fictional character created by a thin person, a fantasy of fat squalor, a confirmation that we do this to ourselves, that we gorge buckets of chicken like mindless beasts, that we never see the world, never let the sun warm our bodies, never step into the sea, never make art, never feel human touch, never truly live.
Fat characters are rarely given storylines outside of their fatness, their bodies and their supposed failures being their primary arcs, if they're even lucky to get that. Such storylines tend to be focused on the gaining or losing of weight, their size a theme to explore shame or disgust.
One of the more recent ones, and this may have or may not have come up in your discussions already, was the movie The Whale. That one is very interesting to me because, especially looking into the background, it's more about this guy reflecting his religious trauma. And I don't know this author. I don't want to psychoanalyze him, but it felt like being overweight was more of he saw it as a curse because I don't think he's ever been fat as far as I can tell. And
not that I'm aware of, but I also don't know that much about him, the playwright.
No. I think the religious trauma and him being gay was something that was way more of a focal point for him. And the fatness was more of a punishment and a self-hatred. And it really comes across in the text.
And if you think about it, that's kind of weird, right? Like, obviously being fat affects one's day-to-day, but the idea that any and all attributes must be a straight through line from fatness to that is a bit odd. It would be just as odd to attribute every characteristic of a tall person to their height. Fat people are fat, yes, but they're also brave, scared, and joyful. They are allergic to flowers and dance every time a Chapel Rowan song comes on. They have friends. They fall in love. They pursue their dreams, travel to places on their bucket lists, and have hobbies. Now, I do see one or two of you in the back of the classroom scoffing at this a bit, and I understand. I mean, after all, these aren't real people we're talking about. They're made up, so what possible harm could be done? Well, attitudes that we see in the media often reinforce dangerous and harmful ideas around fat bodies, furthering misunderstanding of our humanity, as well as why we're even fat in the first place.
A survey involving a nationally representative sample of primary care physicians revealed that not only did more than half of respondents think that patients who were obese were awkward and unattractive, but more than 50% believed that they would be non-compliant with treatment. 1/3 thought of them as weak-willed and lazy.
That's pretty disheartening. You often hear that the supposed reason for why people feel justified in their harassment and bullying of fat people is due supposedly for the good of their health. Meanwhile, it's not actually being fat that's actually causing us harm. It's people in the medical industry having assumptions about us and then not treating us as well because of it.
But they think that, that you must hate yourself in order to be this lackadaisical about keeping yourself healthy, and that fat is related to health, and so like the depressed whale who can't see enough good in himself to do anything about it, the mean and nasty Dursley who can't be arsed to care about anything outside of himself and his immediate pleasure, the impulsive, repulsive, selfish harridan of that Rebel Wilson character who scams people and is like garbage bag dress, like I am a literal sack of garbage was a selling point for this freaking movie. And like that to me is the essence of how we culturally view fat people, especially in media, is like selfish, lazy, impulsive, depressed, self-hating, and fundamentally lacking of willpower.
This points to why it is so important to be mindful of how you write a fat character, because not only does it increase your believability if your character is well written, but also you might literally be able to save lives by forcing people to confront their biases. Along those same lines, I would ask writers be mindful and careful how they proceed when writing relationships between fat people and smaller characters. Those who date fat people are sometimes depicted as though they have a fetish, as if that's the only reason they could possibly be interested in them. We see this more often with fat women than fat men, as of course the stereotypical sitcom husband is typically larger than his long-suffering and far more conventionally attractive wife. This kind of attitude can leave some people who are dating those with larger bodies to feel a deep shame, sometimes even going to the point of wanting to keep those relationships secret. To be clear, it is okay to call a character fat. Fat is not a bad word. You can have a fat character and call them as such. The issue that I and other fat activists have is in someone's solely defining characteristic being their fatness. There are ways to talk about one's fatness and how that affects the way they move throughout the world. We'll be discussing that at a later portion of this lecture. But before we do, let's go ahead and discuss perhaps my favorite and most important rule when writing fat characters.
Fat Bastard is not really a character. He's just a walking pile of stigmatizing stereotypes. You know what I mean? This character is like constantly screaming. When he walks around, it makes boom, boom, boom noises. He's constantly covered in like gross liquids and pieces of food and things where it's like, this is a character that really isn't a character. It's just a statement of, this is disgusting. Look at this disgust. And it's meant to trigger a disgust reflex and kind of shock a laugh out of an audience. It's it's a fat suit example. I think it's kind of one of our worst fat suit examples. It's just like there's nothing redeeming about that character.
It's pretty baffling, I have to even say this. If you're going to have a story with fat people, you have to actually have fat people. Should be pretty straightforward, folks. The history of fat suits goes back quite a ways, back to the earliest records of theater that we have. There were Shakespearean characters that were fat, played by skinny, more conventionally sized people in fat suits, usually comedic in nature. In her video about fat suits, Sarah notes that the history of this padding is linked very much to the portrayal of the mammy character. Because, as has been discussed in this class before, fat phobia and racism are deeply intertwined. Isn't learning fun? Speaking of comedy, that is most likely the genre where you have encountered fat suits before. Movies like Shallow Hal, The Nutty Professor, as well as Austin Powers all feature fat characters played by straight-sized actors with the help of prosthetics and strategically placed stuffing, continually perpetuating the idea that these fat people are funny specifically for being fat. It's also very common in sitcoms, such as How I Met Your Mother, New Girl, and of course, Friends.
Number one, the fat suit looked terrible because they always look terrible. Like they don't ever look like a real person. And like, especially when you have a character who is shown as being fat in their backstory because they're wearing a fat suit, and then you show now it's like very Hollywood small Courtney Cox, and then there's like, you know, in the past, like the fat Monica past for Monica, like she's always eating. She gets mayonnaise on Rachel because, like, why would she stop eating a sandwich to get ready for prom? Like, you know, it's just this, like, you know, fat people, they're just putting mayonnaise on everything all the time, you know, and they never stop eating. They eat 3 whole pies.
But fat suits aren't just for the media that makes you laugh. It's also for the media that makes you think. Christian Bale in Vice or Brendan Fraser in The Whale are prime examples of more recent fat suit usage in dramas. These films, arguably Oscar bait, depict the lives of fat people, one of whom was an actual person who existed in real life. But instead of casting fat people with those actual body types, we cast these guys? Also, actors gaining or losing weight for roles that are outside of their typical size really uphold some uncomfortable anti-fat undertones. Well, this rich, famous actor who can spend hours every day to working out and has a dedicated person who he pays to feed him can do it. Why can't you?
Visuals are so powerful, you know what I mean? And it gives you this visual impression that a fat person's body is a suit they could take off. And so why don't they? They must be stupid. There must be something wrong with them. Like, why wouldn't they just do what fat Monica did? And it's like, she wasn't fat though. Like, she's wearing a thingy that makes her look like she's fat, but she's not. You know, and then so I think it gives this like impression to people that like fat people are fat because they enjoy being tormented or something inexplicable like that. And it's like they could do something about it, therefore they should do something about it. And since they won't do something about it, it's fine for us to treat them however we want. I think the visualness of the starkness between an actor in a fat suit and then out of the fat suit in the current day. It's like they're in the fat suit in the flashback, and in the current day, they're a size, I don't know, US 2 or whatever they are. Then like it reinforces this like blame game that we have around fat people like all of the time.
The practice of celebrating weight loss not only upholds the supremacy of thinness and thin people, it also upholds restrictive ideas about health and beauty that reify racism, ableism, and other systems of oppression.
And you never really see it the opposite way, do you? I honestly cannot think of a time in which a larger actor has been cast for a smaller role. I've seen people get more buff for roles, more athletic and such, but I find it hard to believe that we'd ever see, say, Joy Nash being cast as Audrey Hepburn or Jack Black as Joseph Campbell. I would watch that if it happened, by the way. 100% I would. I can imagine that if that ever did happen, the internet would be filled with upcries and people upset about it, claiming, well, that's just not historically accurate. Meanwhile, Tom Hanks can be cast as Colonel Tom Parker in the Elvis Presley movie, and those same people are nowhere to be found. Fat actors exist, we know they do. So why is there just such this weird resistance to casting them? As we've already discussed, public perceptions of fat people are not great. To award a fat person with such an opportunity could be interpreted as, well, glorifying obesity.
Glorifying obesity is just such a strange idea, right? This is I think one of those things that is a very sort of telling on yourself projection. Because you don't think of representation as glorified unless you feel that way about the way that representation is now, right? Like it's the same way that like any sort of Republican accusation is a confession.
It's like saying, "Oh, you're glorifying cancer."
Right.
It's not an illness, for one thing. But for another thing, it's like I don't think that portraying anything in a neutral light is glorifying it. Fat people exist. We're not some kind of blight on humanity. And the sooner you realize that, the happier you'll be as you exist in this world with fat people.
I just don't even think the juice is worth the squeeze on that question.
Yeah. Okay.
Not because of you, but like anyone that's asking that has already lost the plot. Fat people exist. Period. End. Done. That's it. We have entire shows about like abusers and people that we're meant to identify with. I watched Succession and like I'm not gonna go have a bunch of kids and victimize them for my entire life. Like, what is anyone even talking about? Like, come on.
Wherever fat people go, accusations of glorifying obesity follow. They show up when fat people post pictures of ourselves at the beach, lounging in bathing suits, when fat people play sports or go to the gym, and when fat people dare to be seen as we are in popular media and ad campaigns. When done by thinner people, many of these activities are congratulated and celebrated, or at least uncommented on. When fat people do them, we're told we're glorifying obesity.
I swear, if I ever discover who was the first to utter that cursed phrase, I'm going to travel back into time and turn them into a toad. Fat suits are kind of a chicken and egg situation. Somebody casts a conventionally sized actor to wear a fat suit, thus further normalizing its usage and not casting actual fat actors in their media. Then other people see someone using a fat suit and then decide to copy that, thus furthering, you get it, you understand. And keep in mind, there aren't as many opportunities for fat actors as conventionally sized ones. So when you give a thick, juicy role to a conventionally sized actor who already has a long and successful career, as opposed to the fat actor who maybe has a smaller Internet Movie Database page, it's kind of shitty. Don't tell the principal I used that word. Like, why does somebody like Tom Hanks or Christian Bale need to play a fat character? They have long, successful careers going back as far as I can remember. Give the roles to fat people. Something else that Sarah points out is that fat suits really don't look that good. This isn't a real fat body, and it doesn't look like one. Not to mention, when you take a conventionally sized actor and put them in a fat suit, your brain is just like constantly reminded that that's not real. That's not what they actually look like. Suspension of disbelief is kind of a necessary part of watching television and movies, some genres more than others. So you think it would be an automatic faux pas. When fat people play fat people, it looks better. It gives opportunities for acting to those who maybe don't get as many as their conventionally sized coworkers. And it also offers less risk of perpetuating dangerous biases and bigotries against those with larger bodies. Oh, Okay, full disclosure, I may have partaken in some of that rest stop sandwich, and I think I need to fly to the bathroom. Stay here. Why don't you go ahead and think some of your favorite fat characters, and we'll discuss when I get back. Oh no! I was starting to think she was never gonna leave. I think what my esteemed, if admittedly much grumpier colleague has been teaching you so far has been wonderful. I truly do. I feel like I have grown and learned quite a bit from her on just a personal level. I do find myself feeling just a little bit contrarian, though. Promise me you'll never tell her this, but I like Fat Thor. I know. Wait, please, let me explain. For those who don't know or who need reminding, about 1 million lackluster Marvel films ago, Chris Hemsworth appeared in Avengers Endgame in a fat suit. Thor, Fat Thor, as this iteration has been named, has caused a lot of conversation since appearing on screen. His weight gain is contributed to an unhealthy lifestyle, copious amounts of pizza and beer, brought on from depression after having not defeated Thanos before he successfully snapped half of all of life in the universe out of existence. The first point of contention was, of course, the fat suit itself. My sister from another mister has already explained in depth the issue with fat suits, so I'm not going to rehash all of that here. And I do agree, the fat suit doesn't look good, because no fat suit ever does. And putting someone as conventionally attractive as Chris Hemsworth as one really breaks the suspension of disbelief that is required in such a fantastical film. Oh, she already talked about the suspension. Well, there you go. So I don't want to sit here and make excuses for that. In fact, I'm not going to. The idea that fatness is only the result of unhealthy, excessive eating is a trope that we have seen many times before. People can't be fat and happy. No, of course not. They have to be miserable, their fatness becoming a physical representation of some inner shame they refuse to resolve. See The Whale. Actually, don't see it. By falling back on the stereotype, Avenger Endgame plays into, as well as further perpetuates, a harmful and dangerous bias. Seeing how Thor's friends react to his weight gain, making jokes and generally being rather disgusted, doesn't really help at all. The movie's pretty clear that Thor's fatness is meant to be interpreted as a bad thing.
The writer's choice to include jokes about fatness at Thor's expense demonstrates that not enough work has been done to address and eradicate typical anti-fatness in the work. They could have kept the fat jokes in and immediately had other characters criticize their use, demonstrating that this behavior was unacceptable or detestable. Instead, the fat jokes are used as an opportunity for viewers to laugh, to enjoy the needless criticism of Thor's body without confronting the moral perniciousness of fat jokes and body shaming used in the film.
With all of that acknowledged, I just can't help but be compelled by Thor's arc in this film. Even as I can see the very real problems with it, I can't help but be sort of drawn into his struggles. Thor spends much of Endgame questioning his worthiness and his abilities. As a reminder, Thor's worthiness has always been represented by his ability to handle Mjolnir, the hammer that was given to him by his father, the All-Daddy. When Thor isn't able to wield his hammer in the first movie, this completely shatters his confidence to the bone and just really makes him rethink his attitude. This then, of course, leads to large personal changes and growth. His ability to then be able to pick up the hammer later on shows that he is worthy and also, of course, helps him to defeat his enemies. In a later film, the hammer is destroyed by his sister. Sisters, am I right? Only returning in Endgame again due to some timey-wimey stuff. Thor's inability to prevent the snap, especially in light of the purging his own people went through at the start of Infinity War, clearly causes him to question his abilities and his worthiness. So as stated at the beginning of Endgame, problematic as it may be, is understandable and does build upon previously established themes from the other films. So at the end of Endgame, when he is able to wield his hammer again, we're meant to understand that this is a huge personal victory, and that also he has been deserving the whole time.
Thor stays fat, he fights fat, and in the show-stopping final battle, he wins fat. There is no workout montage, no on-screen dieting, no disgust expressed on screen, just a natural metabolization of grief that each of his fellow Avengers are processing differently.
Did I get a little emotional in that theater watching a fat man accept his worthiness, beating up a bunch of CGI baddies in a theater filled with buzzing other nerds? You bet your green ass I did. Now, granted, this is all undercut by the fact that in the next movie, Love and Thunder, it does start off with a montage of him losing weight, which I don't really know why we needed that. I feel like he could have just lost the weight in between movies without it being remarked upon, but, you know, whatever. Fat Thor is not perfect. Far from it. But in a world where fat representation is so hard to come by, I do find myself enjoying him and his, however flawed, intent behind him.
Regardless of his fat body, Thor is still good. He can help save the world and still has the same value he had prior to gaining weight. Fat Thor's story is one of redemption, of overcoming self-doubt and hatred without losing weight. This contradicts more typical weight loss narratives used in media, in which one often sees themselves as irredeemable or unlovable until they lose the weight. In a world where fatness is too often seen as a before picture, with thinness being the ideal after or end goal, Thor staying fat demonstrates that fatness can be morally neutral.
I wanted to bring this up today, not because the point is that, Fat Thor is perfect and he's good actually, and anybody who disagrees with me is wrong. I bring this up because in these conversations around fat representation in the media, one really important thing we need to remember is that fat people are not a monolith. We do not all have the same feelings about every single fat character that exists out there. There are some fat people who absolutely would 100% disagree with me that there could be anything good to glean from Fat Thor, and they are allowed to express that. There are plenty of characters out there that fat people have very mixed feelings on. We don't all think the same thing.
Kevin Smith.
Oh, okay.
There's
Interesting choice.
There's a lot there. But I think just for very specifically, like the Silent Bob character, even though there was like a lot of, I wouldn't even say a lot, just like there was like this level of fat phobia where like it was, I think, intrinsic to the character, but it was always played off like pretty well. The end of Clerks 1, where Silent Bob finally talks, is like, oh, like this guy's thinking, like he's onto something, and he just chooses not to take up the space, which might be problematic in and of itself. But I always like saw that, and I was like, this feels nice.
This is Hana-chan. She is from Yakuza 4. What makes Hana-chan problematic is that a significant amount of her storyline is based around dieting, and I don't think she's problematic, but I think that the characterization of her having such a large focus on dieting and her like kind of romantic sadness is like, it's hard because it's not bad, because like those things are real, and like they are realities in the lives of like many fat girls. I'm just like, but I love you and I want you to love yourself.
Yeah.
And like I love this character. You don't see like chubby girls in video games like ever, like hardly ever. And this character exists even though there's a lot of dieting subplots. She's got a huge crush on her boss, which is like a whole other thing. And at the end of the game, they do show her having lost weight, which that's what is really makes it a problem for me. But like, other than that, I feel like she is like a real, she gives like the idea of a real person, that somebody, when they started writing this character, had someone in mind.
Kathy Bates' character in Fried Green Tomatoes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The other side of it is there's the, Kathy Bates and Jessica Tandy talking, and it is sort of Kathy Bates' character finding her Tawanda, her coming through to try and find herself. And I enjoy that, except that a lot of it is based in her relationship to food and her and going on a Weight Watchers journey. Like it's 1980s, so we basically have this it was a 1980s movie, so we gotta do the whole thing. And Ursula is a problematic fave.
For sure. I love
Or
Ursula.
there's a character on Farscape that is played by Magda Zubetsky. You remember Furlough?
Yes. I love Furlough.
I love Furlough.
Furlough's great, but I get it. Yeah, she's kind of problematic.
There is unfortunately a bit of like attention drawn to her not being what is seen as attractive, because they do make a joke out of that at one point, but most of the things she gets to be just a person. And the thing is, I rather find Furlough attractive, so and I know she's a horrible capitalist and a villain, but I can save her.
One of the examples I thought of when I knew I was going to do this, what I kept going through, is the character Hurley from Lost. Now this was going back 20 years, so they obviously had a lot of things. And I remember even as a 14-year-old being like, he's a character in the first season that they did not focus on. Now they made jokes about his size, but he wasn't a character feature. It was more focused on him being a kind of goofy, happy-go-lucky guy and that kind of thing. Then in the second season, because people kept fucking saying he's on an island, how come he isn't smaller? They did a subplot where he hid food. And he was so fat. Yes, he's so fat he broke a pier and drowned someone. And like, I don't think that Hurley is overall a negative force in it. I think he's one of the better characters in the show. And I watched the full season. I was a big fan. And I think overall he's a very positive character. But they still couldn't help themselves.
Paprika.
Yes, I'm so glad you just brought that up.
So in the movie Paprika, which is an anime by Satoshi Kon, who is probably my all-time favorite director, one of the main characters is a very fat man who is an inventor. He's a gifted technologist. He's incredibly skilled as an engineer and as somebody working in a very specific subfield of essentially neuromedical work. And he is portrayed with some of the stereotypes. He is childish. He loves toys. He also is at one point pictured as consuming like 3 or 4 stacks of pancakes. But he isn't a fool. He isn't super impulsive. He isn't lazy. He gets respect for what he can do. And I think most importantly, he's allowed to love and be loved. And while that is in no way the point of the story, it is something that always sort of spoke to me. Particularly because his love interest is a skinny, conventionally attractive woman.
There's this show called Swarm. It's really good. I don't know the actress's name, but it's about like basically like overzealous, shall we say, Beyonce fan. She's not called Beyonce in the show. She has a different name, but basically this the main character of this show really loves Beyonce, and she goes on this like rampage. Like if you say anything bad about Beyonce, or even if you just say that she's not your favorite singer, she'll kill you.
Okay.
The actress's name is Dominique Fishback. I think she's a small fat, but I really enjoyed Swarm. It was a really good show.
These conversations have a lot of nuance and are complicated, messy, and 100% should be led by fat people. Allies of fat people need to be willing to put their egos aside, step back, and listen first above all else. Oh, shoot. She's coming back. Gotta fly. Oh. Whew. Sorry that took a little while. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. Fat Thor. What? Before we get to our last rule, I do want to take advantage of your attention for a moment and direct it to something that's extremely important. As I'm sure many people in my audience are already aware, the country that I live in, the United States of America, is experiencing some extremely frightening scenes of state-sanctioned violence. ICE agents are rolling into cities across the country, targeting citizens, immigrants, refugees, and anybody else who dares to stand in their way. The murders of Alex Preddy and Renee Good have of course been largely focused on in the media, but ICE has been responsible for other deaths as well, such as that of Keith Porter Jr., a 43-year-old father of two whose family is still seeking answers. They tear-gassed a 6-month-old baby, for Christ's sakes. I, like many people out there, I am frightened for the safety of my community, for those who were born here or are from away. If you are a Mainer watching this with concerns of your own, then I highly recommend adding this number to your contacts list if you haven't already. This is the ICE warning hotline specific for Maine. If you see ICE agents in Maine, then call this number and give them as many details as possible. Those details should include things such as the direction that the agents were headed in, how many people or vehicles that you saw, as well as the time of day. This acronym is a helpful way to remember all that. There's also an email where you can report abuses done by ICE agents, and make sure to use as many details in that as well. Not in Maine. If you look at it in my description box, I'm going to include as many hotlines as I can find for other states as well throughout the nation. If you don't see your state represented or your area and you do know of a hotline, reach out to me, let me know, and I will add it into the description box. In the absence of accountability on the federal level, it is up to us, the people, to keep ourselves and our communities safe. We will not be bullied. We will not be silenced. We will not stand idly by while people are rounded up. We know our history and where that leads if action is not taken now. Add the hotlines to your phones. Stay diligent out there. And remember that we're in this together.
Before I stop recording, there was one other thing I wanted to let you know, because I don't think I told you this yet. You're actually a really big reason why this video is going to happen. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, back when I was still on Twitter, I wrote like a really long thread talking about how frustrated I get about fat representation and fat characters. And at one point I said, you don't even need to really mention it. You can just have a fat character be a fat character and not have it be a thing. And you actually called me out a little bit, or called me in, we'll say. It wasn't really a call out, but you kind of pointed out like, well, you can still mention it, but mention it in like that way of like, oh, as a character sits down, they might have to be mindful of like the booth, like the table, can they fit in the table? And then, they move on to focusing on their date or something like that. And that really stuck with me. And ever since that we had that conversation and that interaction, I've been thinking a lot about like, well, okay, yeah, how do you write a fat character?
Oh, that's really sweet. I hope I wasn't too harsh.
No, not at all. No. It was again, it was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you kind of, again, it felt more like of a call in than like you being like, now Mandy, let me waggle my finger at you. So I
try not to it sometimes comes out wrong.
As I hope is more evident now, fat is not a bad word. It's just a descriptor, a way to describe a random body in a sea of other fleshy, sweaty, stinking human bodies. No different than tall or short or green-skinned. Although, actually, that's not true, is it? Each one of those things that I just listed off is different from the others. The way a fat person interacts with the world and is interactive with is different than that of somebody who is tall or short. A short person may have to think about how to reach items that are not easily accessible to them, while a tall person may have to constantly worry about hitting their forehead on door frames. Being fat comes with specific experiences and challenges unique to having a fat body. Shopping for clothes is a great example. For some straight-sized people, shopping for clothes might not be no big deal, rather mundane in fact. But for fat people, it can be a source of a lot of anxiety for us. Will I find something that fits me if I go to the thrift store with my friends? Or is the largest size they carry a 12? Or maybe that thrift store did have something in my size, but then somebody smaller bought it, cut it up, and is now selling it on their little Etsy upcycle shop for triple the price and half the size. Stop doing this, please. I am begging you. Even if a fat person does find something in their size, Is it actually flattering? Does it fit their personal sense of style? Is it meant to complement a fat body or to cover it up? If you're writing a fat character and hoping to do so authentically, having these kind of details can add more realism and legitimacy to those stories.
There is a part of this that it's very much like disability, where like everyone wants to talk like a big game around who gets to take up space, who needs these accommodations. And it's out of fear, it's out of shame, it's out of like fat phobia, it's out of ableism. I'm like kind of cutting right to it, but like nobody wants to be fat, I think. And I mean that in the best way possible. But the only reason is because the world doesn't exist for people like me, you know?
Mhm.
I'm in a slightly, interesting position, but because I also have a disability that involves like movement, there's a level of mental math that I have to do anywhere I go where like I don't get to just go to like a restaurant.
Mhm.
I have to like, and you can't see me that like my whole body here, but like I don't look that strange. Like I can walk, I can move, but like I have to go to a restaurant. I have to call ahead of time. I have to make sure that there's a table that I can sit at. I have to make sure that not because of my weight necessarily, but because of the fact that like my mobility issues is I can just like exist at the table. And then that doesn't account for how we get there, if the bathrooms are usable.
Mhm.
There's and I think everybody on some level, whether they're fat or not, like observes that, they see it, they understand it. But rather than saying like, that sucks, we should probably accommodate that more, they think like, oh, it couldn't be me.
I know. At the top of this, I was criticizing talking about a fat person's fatness. However, I do think there's a pretty big difference between reducing someone down to like a single trait and then play into a bunch of stereotypes that are related to that, as opposed to talking about the realities of having said body and allowing to make the story more richer because of it. Perhaps a fat person, meaning a date at a restaurant, has a moment where they notice the size of the booth and hope they're able to fit. Or maybe a fat person chooses not to work out at a gym because too many people have made them uncomfortable and choose to work out at home instead. Maybe they go to the doctor and have to advocate strongly for their health in a way that a straight-sized person wouldn't necessarily have to in that same situation. Fat people shouldn't be reduced to a single trait, but it is possible to write stories about relatively normal fat people living their lives and then pointing out the specific challenges that they face. It can be done well and with empathy. Don't be wrong, it's still challenging, obviously. Partially, in fact, because not all of us fat people can agree on exactly how it should be done. Some people advocate that the experiences of fat people be front and center, while also making sure that those characters feel fully fleshed out. Think of Dietland or Shrill. Some fat people, though, would prefer that these details be used sparingly, used more as background detail.
What I want to see, if the story is about fatness, well, then it should be about fat acceptance. It should be about the discrimination that people face just for being 5 pounds overweight, let alone 100. If it's gonna be a comedy, it should be about the comedy of not fitting into chairs, not the comedy of, oh, there's a fat person on the bus, let's laugh at them. I would prefer that fat representation just be more diverse casting.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, you know, okay, this character is whatever the hell they are, and the actor we cast happens to be fat. That's really what I want. Like, oh yeah, it's okay to have a love interest if you're fat. It's okay to be good at your job if you're fat. It's okay to be a good person if you're fat. It's okay to be a good organizer if you're fat. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all the things that anybody could be, we're allowed to be. People often mistake me for younger than I am
Mm-hmm.
because of how I look, because fat people don't wrinkle as much. People still mistake me for a college student It's very funny. And so I often don't get taken seriously when people see my face, especially if I'm not wearing makeup. It's very easy for people to look at me and just be like, "Oh, you don't know anything. You're young, you're fat, you're female." I have 2 graduate degrees. I am taken seriously in academia. I'm presenting at academic conferences all the time. I have been on the director staff at a nonprofit, and I think that surprises people because they look at me and they see the markers that they know from media as incompetent, naive. And sometimes it's fun surprising people, and sometimes it's not. It's not fun being dismissed. It's not fun being treated like I'm not going to recognize when people are fobbing stuff up on me. And it is a very consistent feeling that I am passed over for young white men.
So and just to kind of circle it back, so when we're talking about, ideal fat representation, are you looking then for more examples maybe of something like that, like a character who is being dismissed for being fat and a woman and looking maybe younger than she actually is, and then being able to be like, no, actually, I'm really smart. You guys. Like, is that kind of what you're getting at a little bit with that? Or
that's good, and I would approve of that. But what I really want is a fat academic woman who is smart and competent, who isn't dismissed. Someone who's just allowed to be fat among the adjectives. Like, maybe it comes up, maybe it doesn't.
I think the fear is that if we focus too much on the challenges being faced, it risks the possibility of being turned into a kind of torture porn, further reinforcing the idea that being fat is miserable. That was frankly my biggest issue with The Whale, and I'm not the only one who thinks so.
Aronofsky may think he's presenting some kind of radically cathartic journey throughout The Whale, but all he's doing is bringing a hollow sense of dignity to his schematic brand of cinematic misery porn.
For me, what feels comfortable in engaging with is going to depend very much on the day and the mood that I'm currently in. For example, in a horror film, I would sort of expect some of the unpleasantries of fat phobia to be discussed, though hopefully in a way that is criticizing anti-fat bias and not playing into them. See Carrie, for example. Carrie White is supposed to be a fat girl. This is explicit in the text and a major component as to why she is being bullied. Why do you think they use pig's blood on her, huh? Make fat Carrie, you cowards! On the other hand, if I'm watching more of a sci-fi epic, for example, I'm probably looking for more of an escape and don't necessarily want a scene where the main character's like trying to find a spacesuit that fits. Fat writers will ultimately have to make decisions about what's going to work best with whatever they're creating. If you are a straight-sized writer, then I guess my question for you would be, what are you hoping to achieve with the inclusion of this character? And also, make sure to have some fat sensitivity readers to look over your piece once it's done. That actually would make a pretty solid rule, come to think of it.
I'd like to see a character who's a lot like me, who is, sarcastic and, has joyful moments and emotional depth and, is strong, not necessarily in the physical sense, but can carry emotional arcs, and is funny, but isn't the funny friend. Just, I want to see a human being.
I think there's a sweet spot. I think we can depict the realities and challenges of what fat people go through, while also remembering to showcase their joy as well. Suffering for entertainment's sake is not very compelling story-wise, at least in my opinion. But, what do I know? There's 30 Saw movies now. Also, it really is okay to use the word fat. You don't have to use words like curvy or voluptuous. I get it. Sometimes we're trying to mix up word usage and we bring out the thesaurus. But it really is okay to use the word fat, I promise. You can be fat and happy, fat and victorious, fat and loved, because those words aren't antonyms. They can and they do exist with each other, probably a lot more often than you think. Well, it does appear to be 1/2 freckle, so our time together is nearly at an end. Let's wrap this class up.
This is my dream ask, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I Saw the TV Glow equally as queer, but with just a big old fat guy. when I saw that movie, like it very clearly has like its theme, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the entire time I was watching it, which was not the point of the film, was like, oh my God, this is what it's like being fat sometimes.
Mm.
Like you don't I don't get to like just go to work. I don't get to like exist in a space with somebody. There's that one specific moment in the movie where like he's doing they're doing the montage
Mm.
of like growing up and everything, like
Mhm.
narrating everything. And like I cried that
Mhm.
entire time. It's resignation. It's saying like, you're right. I don't exist here. I'm not allowed to. I
Mhm.
shouldn't. And you just make it work, you know? And there's
Mhm.
so much of that like the whole time I was watching that, and I've talked to a mutual friend a number of times of like about this movie in particular, where it's just like this low grade, like mental, like TV static,
Mhm.
where like you know that you're valid. There's no amount of anybody reaffirming that fact for you. It's just this internalized shame
Mhm.
that you just are like, I guess this is what the fuck it is now. So we're gonna figure it out, you know?
In today's class, we learned not only how to write a fat character, but why to write a fat character. We learned that representing the humanity and complexity of fat people doesn't just make for better stories, but more accurate ones. We discussed why fat suits are objectively terrible and why there should be more of an effort to cast fat actors into the roles that are more appropriate for their body size to play. We heard from real life fat people, educators and creatives about their opinions on the matter.
Don't start with the character is fat. Start with them as a character and work out how they are affected by the world you have depicted. If you are going to use tropes in regards to eating or in regards to clumsiness or any of this kind of shit, make it a trait that is more defined and adds nuance to the character. I'm a bit more reticent to say you should never use humor in that regard.
Mhm.
But if you're going to, it should reinforce the character rather than be a cheap punchline for laughs.
That fat phobia is so ingrained in everybody. It's pressed upon us by everything around us. And I think taking that and saying, yeah, maybe an individual is a little childish or a little impulsive or a little bit lazy or whatever, likes to eat sweets. Who cares? And saying they're still worthy of love. It's okay to be a person. It's okay to be a whole person, even if you get stuck in an elevator.
You write them the same way you'd write any other character.
Mhm.
You write them as a human being. You give them interests, you give them likes and dislikes, you give them a backstory, you give them emotional depth. It's like you try to make them as real as you can. That's what I do with all my characters. And that's what everybody should do with their characters, especially their fat characters.
Yeah, try and write from the inside, from a person having an experience, living in the world, instead of writing from the outside. Have an object to interact with your other people. I think if you're writing about an experience, even if you're writing about an experience you do have, you got to try and unpack some of those. It's that terroir thing. You got to unpack what are the things that you have internally, and not even aware that you've imbibed, that you're putting into the character. And that's one of the reasons why sensitivity readers are important, because
Mm.
you will never see every issue, but having someone uh, you know read what you've done, and show you where the issues that you didn't see are, is important. And You need to be open to criticism.
My glass half full sister even popped in when she thought I wasn't looking to discuss Fat Thor and why we need to remember that fat people aren't a monolith. She is annoying and I'll never forgive her for dragging me to that Taylor Swift concert, but she did make a good point. And perhaps most importantly of all, we discussed that fat is not a bad word. Will strict adherence to all of these rules guarantee non-problematic fat media representation? Maybe not. I'm sure there's something from this lesson plan that I forgot to cover, and if you think of something, write it down in a comment down below. I mean, my class review, this is a class. It's definitely a class. Hopefully, though, with these guidelines in mind, you can be more mindful and thoughtful about fat representation in media, television, movies alike going forward. Because if you sat through this whole lecture and came out the other side convinced that you didn't really learn anything new, that you knew all of this, implicit bias is a motherfucker to unpack, taking literally years, if not decades, of active work.
Most of us are bad judges of our own biases. We may think of ourselves as egalitarian, clear-headed, justice-minded, compassionate, or we may think of ourselves as rational decision-makers who reliably treat other people with respect. To think of ourselves as biased, even discriminatory, flies in the face of our images of ourselves. It pains us to sit with our biases, so we resist examining them, and because we don't examine them, we don't uproot them, leaving us with attitudes and practices that don't reflect our values or our self-images.
Right now, my expectation is we're going to get worse characters for a while. The industry is in a downturn, kind of like everything's in a downturn. They're going to go with stuff that's safe, and they don't think that making content with fat characters as protagonists is safe. Mm-hmm. And so they're probably not going to do it. The spaces that were opened up for people in rooms are going to close because there's just not enough things being funded, essentially. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, I think that we have seen some really good examples of characters that have been true protagonists, true characters. As we get more of that, right? As we get less The Biggest Loser and more Bridgerton, however you feel about it, people see fat people, it's almost like they have this allergic reaction where they the first time they see a fat person who isn't miserable, they're just like, somebody needs to do something, stop this right now. But as they see it more and more and more, it's just this is just normal, man, and it's fine. Then they kind of either spiral and become an absolute internet weirdo, or they just get over it. Mm-hmm. And that the more that we can see people in normal roles, the more it does normalize it that hey, fat people are just around and it's fine. You don't got to worry about it.
I don't think anything that I've laid out here is really that unreasonable or that difficult to do, honestly. I mean, come on, it must be so much easier just to hire fat people than to make yet another unflattering fat suit, right? Even if it does take a little bit more work and effort than to cast some A-list actor and then make them eat cream cheese for every meal, it is worth the effort. Fat people deserve characters that they can relate to, that they can see themselves in, that they want to laugh with and cry with and share in their victories just as much as any other group. And if you truly, still now, disagree with everything that I said, then ask yourself, why is it important for you to uphold decades-old tropes about fat people? Why do you need fat people to be one-dimensional caricatures of themselves in order for you to be comfortable? What privileges are you afraid of losing?
When what we see in the media contributes to collective understandings of our bodies, investigating fat phobia on screen feels necessary for pushing back on ideas of what is normal, especially because so many films and TV shows still employ tropes that uphold and are upheld by societal anti-fatness.
Class dismissed. Hey! I finished the video! Yay! I apologize for the delay on getting this one out. Things have been weird. There's definitely been a lot going on. Some of you are aware of, some of you are not. There's been things like I got doxxed. Yeah, I got doxxed. Somebody got upset that I was sharing the ICE hotline in a couple places and doxxed me. That was a super cute look. I also had a couple like weird medical things going on. Like I had a weekend of just migraines. One migraine is bad enough. A weekend of migraines, don't recommend it. I really don't. I had a weird thing in my nose. Like it's just been weird. The weekend that I'm filming this, one of my cats, Murray, you all know Murray, he's usually in here fucking something up. He had a seizure the other night. Of course, a major thing that I can't not address is the fact that one of the collaborators for this video, one of the people that I interviewed, Adnan, very unexpectedly and tragically passed away earlier this year. And that's been very surreal. And my little corner of YouTube has honestly been really rocked by that. Adnan was really just a very sweet and kind person. Believed very strongly in community outreach and mutual aid and in fighting the good fight. And it doesn't feel real still that he's no longer here. And I'll be honest, that kind of is another kind of contributor to this video getting delayed, is that I've never had that happen before, and I didn't really know how to navigate it. On his last message to me was him reaching out to support me and offer support and see how I was doing after the whole being doxxed thing. And I think that really speaks a lot to the kind of person he was. You know, there were check-ins, there was reaching out, even when I wasn't always very good at reaching out, because I'm not always very good at that. And having someone like that in my community was always such a source of comfort and joy. And him now being gone really is just such a loss. And I don't know, what moving forward exactly looks like, but I hope that he would have been proud of this project and proud of his contributions. And I hope that you all enjoyed it very much, what he had to say. I obviously appreciate everyone's patience while this was coming out, but especially would like to thank my Patreon supporters. My Patreon, of course, is for people who enjoy what I do and want to give, more regular contributions. For as low as $2 a month, you can get access to extra videos, behind the scenes footage. I've been doing little reviews sometimes, and that's been kind of fun. I didn't get one out last month. I'm sorry, I'm a bad person. I'm not a bad person. I'm just a busy person who overwhelms myself. I also sometimes will post like little extra things related to the video. So like in this case, I'm actually going to be releasing a super cut essentially of all the interviews that I did with everybody. So if you enjoy what people had to say but would like to see more of that, you can obviously go over to patreon.com/Mandy. You'll have access to that. I don't like doing tiers because it's just too much to try and be like, okay, this person only gets this much of this what. So everybody gets the same thing. Just give me what you can and you get access to everything. It's just easier that way. And I don't like hierarchy. So that's how we do it over on my Patreon. Alternatively, if a one-time donation is more your thing, which is totally fine, I do also have a Venmo, a Coffee, or a PayPal. Whatever you can give helps out a lot, especially right now. Financially, things are very rough to the point where I've been considering maybe getting a weekend job, but if I get a weekend job, that's gonna extra push into this. So yeah, anything you can give, especially right now with me now potentially having a cat with epilepsy, because Murray had a seizure this weekend, just whatever you can give really helps me out quite a bit. I don't know exactly when the next video will be out or what it'll even be about, because I have a lot of ideas, and I just randomly wrote one the other day, or most of a script the other day, that I really like, but it's very strange. I don't know how y'all are gonna feel about it, but yeah, that might be on the horizon. I do also still want to make my Kevin Can F Himself video. That's still in the works. I also have my big Maine project that I've been working on sort of in the background. That's still a ways out, but I'm working on that as well. So hopefully I'll have that for you eventually. Obviously, follow me on all the social media, Instagram, Blue Sky, all those things. You can find me. I have been posting shorts occasionally. You've seen them probably here on YouTube. I've had a couple. Also do more with TikTok and Instagram just because I don't really want to like fill this channel with those. But if you are interested in seeing some more of me, like a bit more unfiltered, unscripted, blah, 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 that's a way to kind of like see me a little bit more often if you miss me, because I'm obviously not keeping up a very regular schedule at the moment. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you next time. And if you aren't already, subscribe if you're a good fatty or a bad fatty. Whatever kind of fat. If you're a fatty, you are welcome here. Where can people find you if they're interested in hearing more from you in the future?
Can I be kind of a jerk?
Yes.
Don't ever find me.
Don't
Don't ever find me.
Don't.